Episode 5. The Room. I stepped out of the lab, the sterile air still heavy in my lungs, when I heard it, the faint hum of a refrigerator. I paused for a moment, trying to make sense of the sound. Across the hall, a refrigerator. The noise seemed odd in a place like this, where everything was decaying. Why was it still running? The thought of food, any kind of food, tugged at me. My stomach growled in protest, making it impossible to ignore. I couldn't remember the last time I had eaten, and the idea of something to eat was enough to push everything else aside for now. I had to get in. I crossed the hallway, my heart racing. When I tried the door, the handle barely moved. Something was blocking the entrance. I shoved my shoulder against it, but the door didn't budge. Whatever was blocking the way was too heavy for me to push through. Frustration welled up inside me, but I didn't give up. There had to be a way in. I needed that food, and I wouldn't leave without figuring it out. I stepped back and scanned the hallway. That's when my eyes landed on the branch I had used earlier to break the sink apart in the bathroom. It was sturdy, and in that moment, a thought clicked. I grabbed the branch and returned to the door. I wedged it between the door frame and the top half of the door, just above the handle, and applied as much pressure as I could muster. With a sickening crack, the top of the door split open. The wood splintered violently under the pressure, and the doorframe gave way, just enough for me to crawl through. The broken door hung loosely, creaking on its hinges, and I squeezed through the narrow gap. The room beyond was heavy with stale air, thick with the scent of decay. I was in what looked like a break room. A large couch was pressed against the door, blocking it from the inside, its fabric weathered and torn with age. Everything else in the room had been frozen in time. A small couch sat near a coffee table, cluttered with papers and forgotten items. On the right, a sink and cupboards lined the wall, the doors hanging loosely from their hinges or completely missing. The sink was dry and grimy, untouched for years. The fridge in the corner hummed quietly, almost out of place in such a forgotten room. I had to know what was inside. I approached the fridge and yanked open the door. The hinges groaned in protest, and inside I found a few bottles of water, still untouched despite the room's age. But at the back of the fridge, my eyes locked on something better. Candy bars, a small treasure in this wasteland. I didn't hesitate. My stomach growled louder, and I grabbed the first one I could reach, tearing it open and devouring it. The sweetness hit me instantly, a burst of energy I desperately needed. As I ate, the headache that had been gnawing at me for hours began to fade, the sugar rushing through my system like a lifeline. The room around me seemed quieter now, less oppressive, but I couldn't ignore the strange feeling that lingered in the air. Something about the disarray of the place felt wrong. My eyes shifted to the clothes scattered across the floor. I crouched beside the pile, my gaze falling on a wallet lying next to the clothes. It was worn, its leather cracked and faded. Hesitant, I picked it up, the surface rough under my fingers. I slowly opened it, my heart skipping a beat as I saw the ID inside. It was faded, the ink smudged from age, but I could still make out the name, Sarah L. Thompson. The photo was barely visible. The ink had bled over time, but it was enough to make out a young woman with short dark hair and sharp, wary eyes. She looked tired, burdened even, as if something was weighing on her even in that brief moment captured in the photo. I closed the wallet and set it aside, my mind swirling with questions. Who was Sarah Thompson? What had happened to her? Why had she been here? Whoever she was just another victim of this place, another person who had vanished without a trace. I took a deep breath, pushing the thoughts aside. I couldn't linger on it. I had to keep moving. As I continued scanning the room, my eyes landed on a door at the far end, half hidden behind a large, deteriorated bookshelf. Curiosity piqued, I moved the bookshelf out of the way, knocking out a few books in the process, and tried the handle. The door opened easily, revealing a small, cramped water closet. Inside, a shelf immediately to my right caught my eye. On it sat a backpack, its fabric worn but still intact. Without thinking, I unzipped it. A journal, an old laptop, a handful of pens, and a few loose papers, all useful in their own right. But what really caught my attention was the keycard tucked into the front pocket. It was different from the others I had seen. Sleek, high security printed in red on the front, with a level of importance I couldn't ignore. I tucked the keycard into my pocket and took a moment to glance around. The small water closet, though cramped, had a hole in the wall, barely large enough to fit my hand, and through it I caught a whiff of fresh air. The wind outside carried in the scent of damp earth and water. I stepped closer to the hole, peering through as best I could. The landscape beyond was thick with trees, their leaves rustling violently in the harsh wind. The sky above churned with an approaching storm, lightning flickering in the distance, illuminating the world for just a split second. Everything beyond the walls of this place seemed so alive. And yet, here I was, standing in the remnants of a place frozen in time, surrounded by fear and uncertainty. I let out a slow breath, my body tense. The backpack now slung over my shoulder. I stood for a moment, looking at the small hole in the wall, the wind carrying with it a reminder of what was waiting outside. Whatever had happened here had changed everything. I didn't know what the next step was, but I knew one thing for sure. I was getting closer. The keycard in my pocket felt heavier now, like it held the answers I was searching for. It was time to find out what had happened here, and maybe, just maybe, the answers would lead me to something more than just survival.